light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend Eric Breault, who is the owner-practitioner of Quantum Tones Healing.
Yes.
We wanted to talk about being a soul in transition. There, in this current age of economic obsession and instant gratification and so forth, these dynamics that seem to be dominating our world, it's like everybody wants to do it perfect the first time. And that's not a reasonable expectation. We are souls in transition, going from youthfulness to more maturity. In all the different reflection on philosophies and theologies that I've done in my life, the only conclusion that continues to stand up for me is that life is primarily about the growth of the soul. You know, that whether it's good things or bad things, whether it's this approach or that one, life is primarily about the growth of the soul. And there's so many different things that help the soul to grow. But part of what impedes it is when we want to do things perfectly the very first time and don't allow ourselves to make necessary mistakes.
I know that's where the challenge comes in, is people not allowing themselves to embrace the challenges and embrace the mistakes that are taking place. Scientists are proving that mistakes, even though we're not consciously aware of the mistakes that we make, we actually have synapses are firing in our brains back and forth and making rewiring our brains, making us realize, okay, this is a mistake. What can I do from here? That's at a subconscious level. Our brains, and they're proving this, and they're educating children now that it's okay to make a mistake in the school system, which is a great thing. They're making kids realize,
kind of conditioning them to understand that life is a series of alterations.
Yes, yes. And I think that's a great shift in the education system in our country.
Okay.
To embrace mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes.
Traditionally, education seems to have been about memorizing answers and then, forgive me for, it's somewhat of a vulgar term to use, but regurgitating the answers at the right moments.
Yeah.
It's not just spitting out what somebody put in, it's learning how to think and how to learn within whatever moments your life winds up including.
Well, the sad thing when you get older, become an adult, people get frustrated that they make mistakes and they do things not the way they should be done. They make mistakes in a sense, not being in a healthy relationship, or making a mistake in a sense that they're still making mistakes like 100 times, like with 20 to 100 times in a relationship, to the point it takes 100 times to make them figure it out. Okay.
Possibly, but an additional dynamic, as people get older, they find that the world around them has changed.
Yeah.
And the dynamics they learned as a child don't work anymore.
No.
Everything's not like it was, and so there's a sense in which, whether you're young or whether you're old, you have to be able to look in the mirror and see a student looking back at you.
Yeah.
Always a student, because there's always a new innovation, a new method, a new approach to learn. I was joking with a friend once about correlations of Murphy's Law, and one of the ones we came up with was that the computer correlation to Murphy's Law is that just at the point when you have everything configured and sorted and organized and it's all ready to go, they will send you another upgrade.
Oh yeah.
And you'll have to upgrade your system and do it all over again. It's this never-ending change and change and change and more change.
Yeah, and more openings and more closures and one thing, and then something else opens up. Something else, oh my God, another challenge, another difficulty, another, it's coming at me.
And the hierarchies of the past don't work.
No.
When I was growing up, I don't know how it was in your family, but in my family there was a sense that children were not supposed to be smarter than their parents. And it was, I guess somebody thought it was respectful that if your parents didn't know, you weren't really supposed to tell them because that would make them look bad.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, I'm kind of thinking, well, it makes no sense. If parents clearly don't know the answer, somebody should help them. And why does it have to be another adult instead of one of their own children if their children do in fact know the answer?
Mm-hmm.
Some parents obviously don't have a problem with that. There was a certain age where parents would turn to their kids and say, program the VCR for me, or set up my computer for me now, or things like that. That I think in some ways we've gotten beyond the notion of kids not being smarter than their parents.
Yeah.
But it requires a sort of respect and humility, and yet at the same time, it should be both ways.
Yeah, it should be respect, and sometimes the respect isn't towards the parent, and sometimes it's the other way. But sometimes respect is both depending what family dynamics you live in.
The parents may respect that their children have greater understanding of technology.
Yeah.
But the children need to go on respecting that the parents have greater experience.
Yes.
And all of that experience is valuable information
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to figuring out what might work in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, charging into something without doing the research is essentially going into a problem unprepared.
Yep, and the parents have resources that they can give to their children, so they don't make the same mistake that they made.
Intellectual resources,
yes.
And emotional resources.
Yes, all those resources. And at times, the children don't always listen, but the parents sometimes have to sit back. Okay, I got to let my child learn his or her lesson, and that will help them sort of learn it, and they don't do it again, repeat it.
And on one hand, I'm agreeing that the parent needs to be patient.
Yes.
But I guess as a person outside of that relationship, I'm also looking at the two of them and saying, and you need to listen to your parents so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
So that all the problems your parents have already been through, those are problems that you don't have to learn all by yourself.
No.
You can benefit from their experience and not bother making those mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
As we move more and more toward global community, I hear of countries around the world who are emulating American systems for dealing with certain challenges. And sometimes I kind of roll my eyes and I think, or I tell the person, well, I hope they're not silly enough to make our mistakes as well. We've already made those mistakes, you don't have to repeat them. But in many cases, other countries haven't studied U.S. history enough. Well, we haven't studied U.S. history enough ourselves, but to know how certain social experiments didn't actually work very well.
No.
And why they didn't work.
And like the times certain things didn't work. Slavery didn't work. We've had slavery back in those days where.
Well, even the communes of the 1960s.
Yeah.
There were experiments in communal living, but a lot of them, from a little I understand, tore themselves apart because they didn't have a full appreciation for the emotional and psychological complexities of their members.
Mm-hmm.
They simply didn't know enough about emotions and psychology to dump a whole group of people who had not grown up together into one household, and naively expecting that there wouldn't be conflicts that would be bewildering.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and putting people in that environment, I don't think it was for the benefit,
I mean, it's one thing to want freedom.
Yeah.
But in order for freedom to be a good thing, there has to be responsibility and discipline.
Yeah. Responsibility and discipline is important, as well as freedom. I think having freedom, it's important to be respectful for yourself and others, and be responsible, knowing that you've made a mistake and might have hurt somebody
Well, and
unintentionally.
being willing to own it.
Yeah, willing to own.
This was my mistake.
Yep, this was I've done, and this, sometimes people have a hard time apologizing, realizing that what they've done, and some people don't know that
There's no shame in saying I'm sorry.
Yeah, there is no shame, and we need to teach.
I mean, if anything, it suggests an admirable sort of maturity.
Yes.
That you're willing to take responsibility for what you did, in fact, contribute to a situation, perhaps with all the best intentions, but
Yeah.
it didn't turn out right, so accept responsibility for your contribution and apologize.
Yeah, and some people are not willing, so they're not learning. And we're not learning from the mistakes, so they're staying, so they end up being stagnant and not progressive. Because the mistakes are an opportunity for us to grow and reach higher aspects of ourselves and connecting with our more expansive self. Bringing that energy in more through our being as we make the mistake, and our brain, our spirit, and
Well, and
just sort of-
additionally, it's questionable how well we see ourselves if
Yeah.
we never look through someone else's eyes.
Yeah.
You will see things in me that I will never see in myself.
No.
But if you tell me about those things, I may be able to utilize them.
And that's where relationships come in.
Yeah.
Connecting with your relationship.
Mutually respectful relationships.
Yeah, mutually. And not all relationships are 100% flow. There's always going to be a conflict that we encounter with no matter who you meet. And because the conflicts are there to help us learn about each other. Because if you're experiencing conflict with somebody, that person has an opportunity to teach you something about yourself. So you realize, okay, there's a conflict between us. So what could we do to work and better ourselves? What could I say? What am I not seeing in myself as a being?
But that's where it gets kind of touchy.
Yeah.
Because I would say it's important to own your perceptions.
Yeah.
Even while offering them, because some of them may be helpful and some of them may not.
No, some, yeah.
You know, it's not you are, it's I perceive this in you. Either I'm having a misperception and you need to explain something to me, or it's something that you're not realizing about yourself that you might want to address. But it doesn't need to be assumed to be an adversarial relationship. I'm not saying this because I want to hurt you. I'm not saying this because I'm against you. I'm saying this because it's what I see. You know, I have no negative intention associated with it.
Yeah. Sometimes relationships and specific connections are not meant to be. Somebody's, okay, this makes like a person that's taking away your trust or being not honest with you,
Yeah.
crushing you.
Betrayal's a big one.
Betrayal. And that's where, okay, it doesn't mean you have to resolve it between this person. It means, okay, this person is showing me to find a balance of trust. Finding that balance, okay, not to let everybody walk all over me. To realize, okay, I need to stand my ground when somebody is not being the way they appropriately, reacting appropriately towards me. That you need to just, okay, I need to step back.
In some cases,
Sometimes you have to shut them off if you need to, because that's the best thing, to push them away in a sense, because especially when they're stubborn and not willing to realize that they made a mistake.
well, and it could simply be that that's part of their growing process that they're not ready to face yet.
Yeah.
You know, we don't give a driver's license to an 8-year-old, and you know, there's certain things that come at certain ages because we have to wait for there to be a certain basis of maturity before we start building in that direction.
You know, some people come and go, and we have to honor that. Honor that they, even though there's a conflict, okay, it's not our fault that is taking place, not more necessarily that it's their energy that they need to work with. But they did teach us something about who we are as a person, to realize to push them away in a good, loving way. I bless you, I send you blessings and love and forgiveness. But it's best that we depart our own ways, and you do what you're supposed to do. Maybe in the future we will connect. And that's how you can connect with others around you.
On one hand, I find that brokenness will always have a tendency to reproduce itself. Wherever it occurs, in whatever form, in whatever person, whether institutional or individual, it will always have a tendency to reproduce itself. Some people's brokenness means that I have to maintain a safe distance, but it doesn't mean I stop caring about them.
No.
It's like if someone is drowning, you throw them a rope, you extend a pole, you do not get in the water with them because they will try to use you as a flotation device and you'll wind up both drowning.
Yeah. You don't want that weight on your shoulders.
Yeah. When somebody is in trouble, they need help. But what kind of help or what method, so that you don't put yourself in jeopardy while you're helping them? Sometimes you've done all you can do for them, and what they need is a better teacher or a better specialist or somebody with special training that you don't have.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and it's loving to be honest with them about what you can and cannot provide.
No. They need, and plus sometimes they need somebody that's more of a neutral. They need somebody that they don't have to associate with, or it could be just somebody in counseling.
Well, someone they don't have a history with.
Yeah, it could be somebody that's in counseling, mental
Having
health.
overlapping history can really
Yeah.
complicate things.
Sometimes they need a neutral party. They can't have anybody that they. Some people cannot learn from people they're attached to.
Not learn
Relationship-wise.
from people they attach to.
They're attached to each other or holding on to each other. Sort of, it's friendships. Sometimes friendships are not the best for helping each other, depending what kind of friendship it is. If it's a toxic relationship.
So the more
especially.
difficult things may need to be said by a neutral third party.
Yeah, not by a specific. Cause we may not be the one that be able to can help the person. They need somebody that's just outside of the circle. Especially those who are very stubborn and not willing to hear or share experiences.
Well, and I'm not willing to write somebody off just because they're, quote, being stubborn.
No.
If they're being stubborn, it seems to me it's because they're not ready. It's not the right time. There's something else that needs to be processed first.
Yeah.
Somehow things are not in sync.
No.
But it doesn't feel right to me to blame them and say, well, he was just stubborn, so I couldn't help him.
No. Those are the minor things you can deal with relationship-wise. Those are the minor, but sometimes we can't just help them.
Well, the dynamics may be minor, but what's at the heart of that stubbornness may be something quite major.
Yeah. It can be major. And if it gets to the point that the stubbornness drags you down, that's when you start, okay, I need to.
Well, and that's what I would say as an angel tapping you on the shoulder saying, this is not your job. There are certain things you can do for this person.
Yeah.
This isn't one of them.
No. Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, I don't like it when people say, not my job, and they back up and they're basically apathetic about what's happening to the person.
Yeah.
Because the world is a shared space, everybody's problems are everybody's problems. But figuring out how you can contribute to solution is just plain smart. I'm not a surgeon.
No.
If what's needed is surgery, I'm not the one who's supposed to do it because I don't have the training or the expertise to do that.
Yeah, you don't have the resources to be able to do that offering.
Yeah, I'm not an architect. There's a lot of areas where I don't have abilities and skills that are necessary to the challenge.
And you can be supportive, but sometimes those who just don't want the support, there's nothing we can do if they don't want the support. Sometimes, as I say, you suggest help from a third party, like you say, and sometimes they're not willing to. And that's where they kind of shut themselves off.
Well, if they're not willing to, though, again, that suggests to me, maybe I'm bending over backwards not to be judgmental, but it suggests to me that they're not ready yet.
And that's okay. They're not ready.
Standing back there and saying, but you should be over this by now, or you should be... It was like a friend of mine said when I was first learning about what it means to be gay, when he said, never should on yourself. And I always remember that. I thought it was a very amusing way to put it. But when we when we embrace the word should, when we embrace expectations, we set up an incongruity between honest reality and what we want. And there's no way to bring the two together. You know, at some point we need to set the shoulds and the wants aside, and you know, there's something to be said for maintaining hope and for making an effort, but you have to work from where you are. You can't just superimpose a Monet painting over an inner city environment.
Yeah.
Each one is what it is.
Yeah.
You have to take inventory and start from where you are. You know, being a soul in transition, you have to first figure out, where are you? I'm a little surprised, and is this something you've run into a lot in your practice? How many people have never really taken the time for self-reflection?
There's a lot of people that are not willing to go through self-reflection because they're afraid of who they are. They're afraid. They're afraid to enter that vulnerable space where, oh, I'm seeing too much. And I've had some people...
afraid of experiencing vulnerability?
Yeah, experiencing vulnerability and openings to that connection of the spirit essence of who they are. And they just want to live the traditional old way of who they are, not seeing their true self, not seeing the bigger picture.
Well, if it is the old way, I would say that's one of the illusions that needs to be set aside, because in the final reality, we are all vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, there are more ways to kill a human body than we can count. I mean, this is very vulnerable stuff. I can be scraped, bruised, cut, maimed. I mean, infected by diseases. Just, we are inescapably vulnerable.
Yes, we are. And that's and I feel that people cloud themselves through TV, video games, alcohol, drugs. They do those things because they're running away from that. They're running away from who they are. They're afraid. They're afraid to let go.
See, and that's where I would prefer that they come to an understanding that who they are is something, is a valuable resource for humanity, for themselves and for everyone around them. You know, the saying has been around for a very long time. It takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to do a lot of things. It takes a village for anyone to survive. And in many situations, our best resource is each other. You know, that's where the security is, not in ourselves.
That's the community, having the resources within the community.
And community does not depend upon homogeneity.
No.
Some people seem to think that, well, in order to be community, we have to all agree. Well, no, actually we don't. There can be as many perspectives as there are people. The point in all of this, I guess, is that a soul is in transition, and part of that means accepting life in an imperfect world, accepting that perceptions of ourselves and each other are going to be imperfect, but that if we all collaborate, we can make improvements that couldn't happen any other way.
Strength in numbers.
Strength in numbers, strength in diversity. It is because of our diversity that you will see things that I don't, and I will see things that you don't. And the gift of language, even faltering and stumbling though it may be, is that because of language, I can learn what you know, and you can learn what I know.
Yeah, having that energy exchange, we each have a unique frequency, and we can share that unique frequency, and by coming together as a community based on oneness, we can exchange energy and make a society based on peace and harmony, and even there'll still be challenges within that, but it'll be tolerated. It'll be flowing more smoothly, and progression and growth will be more expansive. Everyone will be a teacher and a student.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Without any conflict between the two roles.
Yes.
It's final brief comment, I guess. I recall reading somewhere recently that in actuality, according to human DNA, we're all Africans. All of life started in Africa. We're all Africans. We've evolved differently in skin tone and hair according to climate effects, but ultimately all of humanity goes back to the exact same family in Africa. The distinctions and the divisions and the separations and the bigotry that has crept up since then is so based on ignorance and denying of this fundamental reality that no matter how much we wish to deny it or pretend or look the other way, we're all one family.
Yes, we are. We are.
We're all interconnected.
Yeah, we all breathe the same air.
Well, and we ultimately all have the same DNA.
Yes, we do. People fail to see that global connection that is very critical and vital for the progression of humanity, that will allow important shifts to take place. And those who are willing to be open, the more who join in that global oneness community, the more we're apt to go through transformations as a collective species that will allow us to reach great heights. We all have that love that's within us, and it's about remembering our essence and tuning into our loving, unconditional loving frequency that we are. We are truly divine beings, but we just have to remember that aspect of who we are. When we remember and come together as a community, we can share that love. That's because we're all, in essence, the same when it comes to unconditional love.